It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm your host, Patrick Brown. Joining me as always are my line mates, Devin Little and Kyle Knopp, and we are pleased to have you with us today. And holy moly, we are joined by, no exaggeration, a journalist and hockey aficionado who unquestionably helped change the course of history for not only the Detroit Red Wings, but possibly all of North American hockey. So we are privileged to be joined by author and producer Keith Gave, author of The Russian Five, a story of espionage, defection, bribery, and courage. And if you haven't read it, read it. And if you haven't watched the documentary, watch it. Keith, we are so honored to have you on our show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, especially that after that introduction, man. That was changed the course of history in the NHL. Come on, guys. Don't put that on me.
We set the bar high here.
No kidding.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us. We've got a lot of ground to cover, a lot of questions. Our Twitter users were super excited to hear from you too. So we're going to dive right in. And quite literally, you wrote the book. Right? You wrote the book. You produced the Russian Five documentary. Both are absolutely unbelievable accounts of how the Red Wings managed to assemble one of the most iconic lines in league history. So first question for you. Did you expect the level of attention all these years later that both the book and the documentary have gotten?
Not in my wildest dreams did I ever imagine anything like this. I knew when it was kind of unraveling early on, especially when the Red Wings won the Stanley Cup in '97 with those five guys. I knew I was sitting on a good story, right? And it would probably make a good story one day, but I wasn't ready to tell it while I was still working in the newspaper business. I think at the time, if my colleagues at the Free Press would have found out about it, in my role and all that, I probably wouldn't have been working there. You know, I was on pretty thin ice ethically, you know, what I did.
Sure.
But, you know, when they asked me to, after they drafted Fedorov and Konstantinov in '89, had lunch with Jim Lights, and he asked me to go to Helsinki, Finland, and pass along a message to those guys. First thing I said was, absolutely not. There's no way I can. No. Are you kidding me? I'm covering the Red Wings. I'm not going to do a favor for the team that I cover. Ultimately, I did.
Spoiler alert.
No question about it. I did. But listen, guys, I did it as a beat reporter making a deal with his source at the Red Wings. The guy, the owner's son-in-law asked me to do this. He was willing to pay me a lot of money to do this. And I'm talking about life-changing money, right? And I said, look, I can do this for you, Jim. If I can't, I'll try. There's no guarantee that I'm going to get to Helsinki, Finland, have an audience with those players, and actually get in a position where I could sneak them a message. But I was able to do that. But I said, I'll do this only if these guys start coming over here. I want the story first for my readers at the Free Press, and I want the first interview with Sergei Fedorov when he's ready to sit on and talk. I want first dibs on all things Russian if this happens. And he said, deal. So I cashed in a bunch of air miles, and I paid my way. I didn't take a dime from the Red Wings. And I was lucky enough to pass this message along to these guys. And, less than a year later, about 11 months later, I'm sitting at home. I was living in Dearborn at the time, sitting at home having dinner. And it was like late third week of July, I think. And got another call from Jim Lights, who said, hey, Keith, this is Jim Lights. I said, yeah, Jim, how you doing? He said, I'm doing great. I'm in an airplane, in Mr. Ilitch's airplane, flying home from Portland, Oregon. Guess who's sitting next to me? And I said, who would that be? And he said, Sergei Fedorov. I said, great. I shoved my plate of food away, and I started, grabbed my notebook, and I started, taking notes fast and furiously, looking at my watch, looking at when my next deadline is, so I could get this in tomorrow morning's newspaper. And it was it was kind of hectic. About 10 minutes later, after talking with him, I hung up the phone. I called the city desk, not my sports editor, but the city desk. And, we're really close to deadline there. It's pretty hairy in the newsroom in a major metropolitan newspaper. I said, Keith gave, what do you got going on page 1 tomorrow? And he said, why do you care? Hockey doesn't start for 4 months. And I said, whatever you got on page 1 tomorrow, I'm going to blow it out of the water. He said, what are you talking about? I said, there's a Soviet defector on his way to Detroit right now in Mike Ilitch's airplane coming to play hockey for the Detroit Free Press. His name is Sergei Fedorov. There was a long pause. And then he said, you got 35 minutes. And I grabbed my laptop and I started typing fast and furiously for 35 minutes. I hit the button. I sent it off to the to the city desk. And the next morning, about 6:15 in the morning, when my newspaper landed on the doorstep, like newspapers used to do in those days. Right?
That's true.
I picked up the newspaper. There it was. Unfolded it. Page 1 above the fold. Sergei Fedorov on his way to Detroit to play hockey for the Red Wings. And then things started to happen, of course, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Devin, I'm going to toss it over to you. We've got a lot of questions.
Speaking of your role at the Free Press, what was it like working for the Free Press in the late 80s and covering the Red Wings in the process?
No, that was it. We're talking about the heyday of newspapers, really. I mean, both the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News were 2 of America's top 10 newspapers. They beat each other's brains out every day. Great competition, all for the benefit of readers. It was a glorious time to work for a newspaper. The 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s until the internet came along and changed our whole world, right? But it's covering the Wings. I started covering the Wings in 1985, 86. My first big story with the Red Wings that summer was the defection of Peter Klima from Czechoslovakia to come play hockey for the Red Wings, right?
Yeah.
And you remember a couple of years ago, the Red Wings were on a pace to be the worst.
Yes.
The worst season ever, right? And they didn't quite get there. I covered the worst season in the
So you can still have that, yeah.
1985-86, they won 17 games, lost 57, and tied 6. 40 points. They finished 21st in a 21-team league, last place by a mile, right? Mm-hmm. And the next year, they fired 2 coaches my first year. 2 coaches, Harry Neal and Brad Park. Then they hired a funny little French guy, Jacques Demers. And Steve Yzerman was emerging as a superstar in the league. Guys like, Bob Probert and Joe Kosar, the best 1-2 punch literally in the NHL history.
Oh, yeah.
And they played in a bad division, the North Division. All you had to do was there were 4 teams. You had to beat 1 team and you're going to be in the playoffs. Right? And you needed to win 2 rounds against 2 bad teams, St. Louis, Chicago, Minnesota, St. Louis, and Toronto. And you could advance to the Stanley Cup semifinals, which the Red Wings did. I mean, they got crazy lucky, caught lightning in a bottle. But from 86 to being the worst team in hockey to 87 and 88, advancing to the Stanley Cup semifinals to play Wayne Gretzky and the Edmonton Oilers 2 years in a row. They lost, of course. They lost in 5 games. Right. But they went to the Final Four. This town in Detroit was going nuts. It was crazy. It was as much fun covering that team in the late 80s as it was in the late 90s when they were winning Stanley Cups.
That's awesome.
Really fun.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kyle, you got a question?
Sorry, I thought he was cut him up there. Back to 89 draft, when Fedorov and Konstantinov were taken late in that round, before you sat down with Jim for that lunch meeting, did you have any inclination that you'd play such a role in bringing them over here, or at least initiating that?
Oh heavens, no, not at all, not at all. I mean, Jim Devillano, the general manager at the time, tipped his hand. He was quite open. He said, "We're probably going to draft some Europeans, and we're probably even going to draft some Soviet players. I know the Iron Curtain is still there, but the world is changing, and we got to plan ahead. We know where the great players are. We might take a Russian or two in this draft." And I'm kind of excited now because my background, the military background, knowing some Russian, working for the NSA like I did, working at a spy station in West Berlin when the wall was there, keeping track of the bad guys on the other side of the wall. I was excited. So they drafted two Hall of Famers right in a row. In the third round, Nick Lidstrom, the fourth round, Sergei Fedorov, and then they took a flyer on the captain of the Soviet national team, Vladimir Konstantinov, in the 11th round. But I had no inkling at all then about my role. Not till about a month later when Lights invited me for lunch and asked me to try and orchestrate or at least initiate the first step, making first contact, and I was able to do that. I actually was in Helsinki. I did get down where the dressing room was. They actually brought him out of the dressing room. I think they brought him right out of the shower because they're both dripping wet, white towels around them, around their waist. And I wondered who this clown is, wanting to talk to me. A KGB guy about 10 feet down, looking at me, keeping track of every move I'm making. But I had the draft list that the Red Wings had, about 6 weeks earlier in June. And I said, Sergei, there you are, fourth round, 74th overall. There's you. And Sergei just didn't show any sign of reaction at all, emotion or anything. And then I showed Vladdy, there you are, Vladdy, 11th round, 212th overall, whatever it was. And Vladdy's excited like the little kid who got the bike for Christmas, right? Mm-hmm. And I find out at that moment or a short time later that is the day, that is the moment they learned that they had been drafted by the Detroit Red Wings.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they were. This is way before the internet and stuff, right?
Right, of course.
Yeah. Like nobody told them.
Yeah,
nobody told them.
That's crazy. So then once they got here, obviously when Fedorov defected, it was a huge deal. In the documentary, I think they show clips from CNN and things like that. Now, once they got here, what was your relationship with them when they arrived? Was it different than what the other reporters had? Do you still maintain a relationship with them today?
Yeah, I do. I have a good relationship with all of them. We're not buddies. I don't. Sure. We touch base every now and then. I see Igor at Little Caesars Arena because he's an agent. He's there at most games now.
Right.
We chat a little bit and so on. And I've been to Slava Kozlov's home a couple of times. They're not my friends. They're not my buddies. We had a different relationship because I could speak a little bit of Russian with them. And we never did a lot of that even. I didn't practice a whole lot of Russian with these guys. They didn't want to speak Russian in the dressing room with me. Really, I mean, they went out of their way to speak English. They spoke a little bit of Russian to themselves, but they integrated the way they needed to by learning English and speaking English. At least everybody except Slava Kozlov.
I was gonna say, except for Kozlov, right?
Yeah. And he spoke better English than he let on. He spoke just fine. He was just he was a little bit cantankerous,
Darren McCarty, who's been on this show as well, he had a thing or two to say about Slava.
Yeah. But the flip side of that is Slava Kozlov is one of the kindest, most gracious, most generous people. We were in over there in Moscow in '94, but 5 years after the Iron Curtain fell and so on. During the lockout, the first lockout in November, we were over there, and he went over there. He actually played for the Red Army team against the NHL Stars, and he was kind enough to invite me to his home, meet his family, his grandfather, and so on, and his father. Took me to the little rink in Voskresensk, which is a suburb of Moscow. And they were just so kind and generous. And when we were back there in 2015 to interview them for the documentary, Slav again had me out to his house. And he's just a really, really good guy. Oh, so don't believe everything you hear from Darren.
No.
All those guys are, good guys, gentlemen, every one of them. But Slava, I think Kozlov got a little bit of a bad rap.
Sure. And I certainly didn't mean to insinuate anything. Devin, to you.
Obviously, in bringing over Fedorov and Konstantinov, it kind of changed the league over time. And obviously, you had a hand in making it all happen. So I'm wondering if you ever take the time to reflect on the impact that you as an individual had on hockey as a sport in North America.
I try not to think about that too much. This is not about me at all. I had a role unquestionably, and it was important at the time. It remains important to me, but I never gave it much thought until June 7th, 1997, when they won the Stanley Cup.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm in the dressing room. It's the crowded room. And, just like this, just trying to get around. I'm trying to do a little bit of work. There's champagne and beer and everything flying all around. I would never be able to read my notes. So I just gave up my story that night. I made my way around the room. Then I went up to the Mike and Marian Ilitch's suite, and I talked to them. And that was kind of my column for the next day is everything that they put into the millions and millions of dollars trying to build this championship team. Finally came to fruition. They bought the team in '82. 15 years later, they finally had a championship team. What it meant to them and so on, and it turned out to be a pretty good story too, because Mike Ilitch was in the cups a little bit and had a few drinks. It was highly emotional. But anyways, I'm walking around the dressing room and I get over to Sergei Fedorov, who is believe it or not, was surrounded by beautiful girls in his corner of the.
Fedorov? I can't believe that.
Yeah. Anna Kournikova was one of them, of course. But
recall that.
Yes, but I get over to.
I was in junior high. What can I say?
You remember then?
I watched a lot of tennis at that age. Anyways, sorry.
Sergei was, I congratulated him, shook his hand and so on. And I said, way to go, congratulations. And, Molodets, which means attaboy in Russian. And he leaned over, he said, hey, Keith. And I said, yeah. He said, you remember that night in Helsinki a long time ago? I said, yeah, Sergei, I remember. He said, I never tell anybody. I said, good, don't tell anybody. That's our secret. But I kind of knew that's when I sat down and started writing the first probably 5,000 or 6,000 words of the book. It was in '97, but I didn't really get back to it until 2013, 14. So a long time later, I'm out of the newspaper business. I was teaching journalism and English comp at a college, and I had a little bit of time, and maybe it's time to write this book. I had just finished working with Doc Finley, the Red Wings physician for 47 years, who wrote a book called Hockeytown Doc. And I edited his book for him, worked with him, put that together, and got that all done. I said, you know what, maybe it's time to try and put this Russian 5 book together. And about the time I was doing that, Joshua Reel, the young director the director of the documentary, called me and asked me if I would have any interest in working with him. And I said, as a matter of fact, I'm kind of writing this book. And he had no idea my part in all of this either. And the more I talked to him, I mean, after before our first phone call ended, he said, you want to be the writer producer credit, and work with me on this thing? And I said, yeah, because nobody else can.
Yeah.
I wrote this book because I'm not one of those writers who needs to see his name on a book on a bookshelf, right? I don't have to do that. But I knew that if somebody once said, if you wanted to read a book that's not out there, you might have to write it yourself, right? Yeah. And I thought I was the best person to write this book because of my role and my relationship with those guys, everything I knew about it from Mike Ilitch on down. I was the source for a lot of that stuff, and so I sat down and wrote it.
So going off of that, I mean, I'm glad you wrote the book. Thank you for that. I mean, it's a fantastic read. The documentary is amazing. I've watched it multiple times. I tell any of my hockey friends, whether they're Red Wing fans or not, that they have to watch the documentary. I mean, it's just such an imperative part of the sport at that time.
You still cry at the end?
A little bit. Oh yeah, it gets teary for sure. And I mean,
I've watched it probably 50 or 60 times, and I always cry at the end. I'm always in tears.
It's so well done. So well done. And like you said, you were really the only person that could put that book together because of the espionage and the secrecy behind everything. With that in mind, do you have any other future type hockey books that you want to get out there that are other, espionage behind the scenes or other type of stories that you feel that you should be telling?
I don't think there's not a lot of cloak and dagger stuff like that. But I gotta tell you, there's I got an idea for another book. I was writing one book, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But the Free Press called me. My former sports editor at the Free Press, Gene Myers, called me in late spring and said, we're putting a book together commemorating the 25th anniversary of that 97 Stanley Cup team, and we'd like you to be involved. You wrote the Russian 5 stuff and so on. And he had 3 or 4 or 5 pieces that he wanted me to write and contribute to this book. It's going to be a really cool book, by the way. It's called Stanley Town 25 Years Later, the inside story of how the Stanley Cup returned to the Motor City after 41 frustrating seasons. But it's one of those coffee table books that's with a lot of new stuff. And I was putting this doing my thing, and I didn't want to just cut and paste chapters from the Russian 5 book into this book. I wanted to give them something new and different. So I got out my couple of bins of all the research stuff that I did, thousands of pages of interviews and so on. And I started going through this stuff. And I gave him what he needed, a lot of new stuff, different stuff. And the book that the Free Press is going to come out with next fall, I think, is just awesome. But it gave me an idea that there was so much stuff in all my notes here that wasn't in that in the book or the documentary.
Okay,
can't believe there's more.
There was so much. If I would have written all the good stuff. This book would have made War and Peace look like a novella. I'm thinking there might be more to that story that I can share with people. We got all these great interviews, and some of the stories that Brendan Shanahan and Dave Lewis and Igor Larionov and Scotty Bowman, everybody's got great stories, and there's a lot of good stories about Vladimir Konstantinov that are still to share. So there's more of that stuff that I'm trying to compile into a book. I don't know whether it's going to get done or not, but I think there's something there. I can't make any promises. But the other book that I'm really excited about is and I've drafted a co-author, another writer, Tim Rapley, who has written 2 books, Jack Parker's Wise Guys, and a book about Hobie Baker. And
nice.
Together we're putting together a book on the 1998 Winter Olympics, the first time that the NHL. Remember that?
Nagano.
Was that Nagano? Yeah.
Nagano, Japan. I was over there and I covered that the ice hockey tournaments. That's where everybody was going. All the drama going in was who's going to win the gold medal, Canada or the U.S. Right?
Yeah.
Neither one of them finished. They got a medal.
That was.
But on the other side, on the women's side. The women, Team USA women, upset Canada to win the first gold medal awarded to women in the U.S. ice for a brand new sport, women's ice hockey. And I've been talking to Cami Granado and lots of other people, and we're putting together a book on that upset. It's very, very similar for young women in America as the 1980 upset of the Team USA over the Soviets, right? Had a lot of influence on, a generation of 10-year-old boys like Mike Modano and Doug Waite and Keith Tkachuk and those guys. Jeremy Roenick were all kids at the time, and they see the Americans upset Canada. All of a sudden, they're falling even more in love with hockey, right? And 18 years later, they're playing in Nagano, Japan, on the men's team. But the women's, the Team USA women upsetting Canada is a hell of a story. And what those women have been doing since then, Cami Granato, a scout with the Seattle Kraken, AJ Mleczko, you saw her, you listened to her analyze games this past Stanley Cup playoff tournament, right?
Yep.
Doing a great job. But some of these women are doing some really amazing things. And we're writing this book. The manuscript will be at the publisher by springtime. It'll be out next fall.
Very cool.
My title is A Miracle of Their Own.
Oh, I like
I
it.
love it.
Oh, that's
I love
awesome. That's awesome.
I love it. Yeah.
Playing it off a league of their own too. That's fantastic. I love it.
It's gonna be a good book.
Good
Looking
stuff.
forward to it.
Can't wait for both of those to come out. In fact, let's take a quick timeout. Thank you, the viewer, for watching our show. Give us a like, subscribe to the Hockey Writers channel. We've got so much good stuff on here. We've got Blackhawks banter, Saber scoop, what's cracking, Chicks and Sticks, which Keith, you should go on there when you do release that book. They'd love to have you on there.
Yeah.
And of course, our newest show, Union Junction, as well. Follow us on Twitter. Follow Keith on Twitter at Keith Gave, and sign up for our Morning Skate newsletter. You all know already. We're on Spotify. We're on iHeartRadio. If you need us to fly to another country, slip them a note and have them defect so that we can deliver you your hockey news that way. Well, we're probably not going to be able to do that, but we'll try.
This is your best one yet.
Thank you. You guys know at this point, we love engaging with you. Leave your comments, leave any questions, reach out to Keith on Twitter. We really appreciate his time on the show today as well. Okay, bills are paid. We live to see another week. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about present day Red Wings hockey. And to kind of kick it off and lead it off, Keith, curious just your comparison between when you were covering the Red Wings in the 80s versus what hockey has evolved into. What has changed? How different is the game?
Well, it's really different, isn't it? I watched it evolve from the bench clearing brawl stuff in the mid 80s when the games were 3.5-4 hours long, and you haven't seen a bench clearing brawl in the NHL in forever, right? You see it more in basketball and baseball. Then the Russian Five came along, right? All these Europeans came in, and really, literally, the Detroit Red Wings changed the NHL with those Russians. And the key word phrase was puck possession, right?
Oh,
puck. It's our puck. Don't let the other team play with it. Remember, I went to work in Dallas for a few years after I left the Free Press in the late 90s, and Ken Hitchcock was the coach there. They won the Stanley Cup in '99 when I was down there. But Hitchcock said, "Man, we used to hate playing Detroit because they never let us have the puck, right?" The NHL's a copycat league. Everybody was doing it. And it was beautiful hockey, really, except for the teams that played the neutral zone trap and stuff. I mean, there was boring hockey going on too, but there was some really beautiful hockey being played. And today, it's all speed. Dump the puck in, rim it around the boards, trying to create an odd man advantage along the half boards there, right? And it's not as pretty a game. It's not as beautiful to me. In a lot of ways, it's not as interesting to me. There's certainly with what players can do at the speeds they're doing it now is highly impressive. It's amazing. And I like this. I like the fact that smaller guys are getting a chance to really, because the game has opened up a little bit. It's not nearly as physical as it was. I saw a kid last night in Traverse City at the Prospects tournament. This Tuchayev, Kirill, got 2 goals last night. 5'9", 146 pounds. He was the best player on the night.
This is like Devin size.
Not wrong.
I don't know if he could play or not, but he was a 7th round draft pick a couple of years ago. It's the Red Wings sneak it out there to Europe and finding a player that might be able to play deep into the 7th round. But back to your original question, to me, it's not nearly as interesting a game today as it was when I was covering a team and the Wings were winning Stanley Cups. It was they were a joy to watch all that talent. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question now, specifically on the Red Wings. Do you feel that the ongoing rebuild is heading in the right direction?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the right guy is doing it right. I mean, he did it in Tampa. He first of all, he learned a lot in Detroit at the hand under the wing of Ken Holland.
Sure.
Then he went down to Tampa with a real good owner down there. Was given carte blanche to build a team. Fired a coach, hired a young guy like John Cooper, who nobody knew, and turned out to be a pretty good coach. And made some tremendous draft picks. Braden Point in the third round, and making some of the trades that he made. Jonathan Drouin for
Sergei.
I wrote an article on that. Trading Mantha away, greatest trade, one of the greatest trades I've ever seen. What he got for Mantha, right? And I think it's going in the right direction. I saw a bunch of kids last night who are going to play in Detroit. Very, very soon. Raymond Lucas looks like a player. Jonathan Berggren looks like a real good player.
Yep.
I don't know about John. I like Joe Galeno a lot. I don't know. The jury's still out on him. He didn't dominate quite as much as I wanted to see him dominate last night.
Sure.
But they have players coming. This kid, Moritz Seider, is, the only thing that I worry about with him is people expect too much too soon from this kid.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to put in. They want to. They want to put him in a number one pairing, like right now, and he's going to win the Norris Trophy in his second year, and blah blah blah. Right? Give the kid a chance. He's still a kid. I know he played the Men's League in Germany, and he had a pretty good year in the Swedish League last year as well. But he's still a kid.
Yep.
Let's. You can screw up a young defenseman by throwing him, into the fire too fast. I don't think they're going to do that. But they got kids coming. It's not going to happen overnight, especially in this division, the Atlantic Division.
Yeah.
The Stanley Cup finalists and two other teams that won the division last year. That's who you're competing with to make the playoffs. I think they're going to be a lot better. Think about this, guys. Think about this. 2 years ago, they were on pace to be one of the worst teams ever, and then last year came along. If you prorate the points that they got each season over 82 games, they had a 25-point improvement last year.
Yeah.
And people wanted to fire the coach.
Yep.
That's not right. I mean, when you have a 25-point improvement, you don't fire the coach. You tout him as a candidate for coach of the year. For God's sake. Is Blashill the coach for this team? Yeah, he's the coach for this team right now. I don't know if he's the coach for this team 3 years from now when they're a legitimate playoff, certainly a playoff contender and contender to win 2 or 3 rounds in the playoffs. That's down the road a little bit. Then they're going to have to go out and find their Scotty Bowman again.
Absolutely.
Right. And touching on Blashill, you did mention that he is the guy for this team right now. What do you think about him makes the development of these players or makes him the guy to develop these players as opposed to, someone else coming in and taking them while they're still young?
Well, that's his MO, isn't it? I mean, that's what he did in Grand Rapids before he got to Detroit. He developed a lot of players who turned out to be pretty good players. The Darren Helms and Justin Abdelkader was okay. He developed a lot of kids down there, and who were serviceable NHL players. And then he came to Detroit. And, they made the playoffs the first year. They had Dotsuk and Zetterberg and so on. And they were at the tail end. Yeah. And then they started trading away all of his players.
Right.
Yeah.
And they actually brought him in. I've talked to Jimmy D about this many times. And, they brought him in and said, Jeff, it's time. We got to start this rebuild. We probably should have started it 2 or 3 years ago. But, we're going to start this rebuild. We're going to be trading away a lot of your best players. And some of your other best players are going to be retiring soon. And you're not going to have a lot to work with. Don't worry. We know how bad this team is going to be.
Yeah.
And, so that's why he didn't get fired, guys.
Right.
You could bring in, with this team the last 3 or 4 years, you could bring in Scotty Bowman with Todd Blake and Al Arbor as his assistant, and they wouldn't have done any better. There wasn't enough talent here to win.
That's
what I wouldn't give to see Scotty Bowman, Toe Blake, and Al Arbor behind the bench.
With this group of guys. Oh my God, they'd be pulling their hair out every night.
Yeah, made my year. So actually, Keith, that brings up another interesting point. We have talked at length on this show about the captain currently, Dylan Larkin, who in recent, at least the past year, maybe year and a half, he's really come under a lot of criticism for his offensive numbers, things like that. Is he a first line center? Is he a second line center? So that begs the question, especially with all of your experience, is Dylan Larkin the guy? Do you think he's going to be the captain that leads this team to a championship?
Well, he may be the captain, but he's not the guy.
Sure.
He's not. Listen. From a leadership standpoint, I don't think you ask any more of the guy. You know, I mean, he does and says all the right things. He's not a number one center. He's playing out of position. They don't have a number one center. And you know what? He might not even be a number two center. Really.
Interesting.
I know from conversations I had in Traverse City last night, talking to some of the right people who know what they're thinking at the top of this organization. And I'm not going to mention any names, but Dylan Larkin's name comes up a lot like that. And here's the thing: they know he's not a number one center, and they need the only way you get those guys is to draft them in the top three, right?
Right.
In the wings,
or free agency, or
or right,
getting lucky on a trade when they're still young or whatever. But you have to have that high draft pick. Absolutely,
exactly. But they know that Dylan Larkin is okay for this team right now. Is he the guy? He has to be, because there's nobody else, right?
Sure.
He's stuck there. But if on a good team, on a team that can make the playoffs, Dylan Larkin's probably a pretty good number two center. On a Stanley Cup championship team, he's probably a number three center.
Wow.
Okay.
That's their thinking right now.
Sure.
And it's fair, really. You'll go back to look those 97, 98 teams. And to call Dylan Larkin a number three center is not disparaging him in any way, really. And look at back in that 97, 98 team. They had the Russian five with Lirianov at center, right? And if he wasn't centering the Russian five, he was centering a line with Martin Lapointe and Brendan Shanahan. Yeah. And you had Sergei Fedorov on a line with Slava Kozlov and Doug Brown, right? Well, and then you had the grind line, right? The fourth line that they didn't touch because of the Where was Steve Yzerman and all that?
Third line.
Steve Yzerman arguably was the third line center on that team.
Yeah.
Really. He took all the important faceoffs. If they needed a defensive line, he'd go out there with a couple of defensive forwards. If they needed, an offensive line, he'd go out with, a Brendan Shanahan and a Thomas Sandstrom, whatever. But realistically, Steve Yzerman, as great as he was, captain of that team, was really the number three center on that team.
What an awesome,
very interesting point.
And I accidentally set off a firestorm a couple weeks ago by calling Larkin a second line center. So I can't wait to hear what they have to say, what our viewers have to say about the third line. I love it. Sorry, Kyle, didn't mean to.
No.
And all that said, right? I love Dylan Larkin. I think he's a great kid. He's a great kid. He's a great face of this organization for all the right reasons. I love that he's Waterford, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how cool was it that they had a captain, an alternate captain, Luke Glendenning, who's gone now, and the coach, all
from Michigan
guys.
Yep.
That's kind of a cool thing.
It is.
Absolutely.
So going out from Michigan, we're going to go back to Russia real quick. We have a viewer question here that I'm going to throw at you from Mr. Simon Roberts. Shout out to you. What was the response from the Russian public media, etc., during the Russian 5 era in Detroit? And based on that, do the Red Wings have kind of a following over there to this day?
I don't know what it's like to this day, but back in that day, in the mid to late 90s, 2000s, when the Russians were here, they had a huge following in Moscow and around Russia among hockey fans for sure. And I went over there in '97 with the Stanley Cup when they took it over there, and I got to see it firsthand. But what I really enjoyed talking with Igor Larionov, especially Sergei, Slava Kozlov, when they were in the midst of winning in '97 and '98, and they talk about their friends, family, hockey fans back home would be getting up in the middle of the night. They're 6 hours ahead. To follow the Detroit, watching the Detroit Red Wings in Russia. And Sergei Fedorov had a great story for me later on in his career. He actually told me this in 2015, actually, when we were over there. He was then the general manager of the Red Army team. And he said, Keith, when I came over here to Detroit, I was pretty young. People didn't really know who I was. He didn't have a lot of time playing with Red Army or the national team then. He said, but I'd come back to Russia, to Moscow, and people would stop me on the street and say, "You're our guy who plays for that team in Detroit." Awesome. They recognized him as a Detroit Red Wing.
That's awesome.
One of their own Russian guys. And Sergei thought that was amazing, and I do too.
So I have something to piggyback off of that, because that was a two-part question by Mr. Roberts there. What was the thought when they first defected over here? We're back in Russia. Was it kind of, did they get treated almost as traitors? Were they kind of looked at as though they were giving up on their country? I mean, what was the initial thought when all of that was starting to unfold?
Yeah, for hockey fans over there, it was kind of sad because when the curtain fell and guys were starting to come over, the quality of hockey was diminished over there, of course. And the interest in hockey was waning a little bit because all the best players had come to North America. So the hockey fans were sad about that, but they also were very, very proud of their hockey players, their stars, who were coming to the best league in the world and being stars there and helping their teams win Stanley Cups. So there was, some a little bit of both, happiness because they were so proud of the players that the Soviets developed and sent to the best league in the world, but they were all in North America, and so it was frustrating for them. Let's put it that way. And I got to see when Sergei and not Sergei, but Slava Kozlov, Slava Fetisov, and Igor Larionov brought the Stanley Cup to Moscow and paraded it around. Actually, took it all over the city, and people's reaction to those players. They were curious about the Stanley Cup, but to see them react to, especially the two older guys, the Igor Larionov and Slava Fetisov. That's how somebody in Detroit would react if they saw Gordie Howe and Steve Yzerman walking down Woodward Avenue.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, Slava Fetisov might be arguably the most famous athlete that Russia's ever produced.
Wow.
That's crazy.
And Igor Larionov is right up there.
That's awesome.
And they're recognized wherever they go.
Would you say more so than Tretiak?
I would say Fetisov more than Tretiak. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
But Tretiak, and there were other ones too. I mean, Valery Kharlamov.
Kharlamov, obviously, yeah. But I mean, when you think Russian hockey, those are Kharlamov and Tretiak are the first two names that almost every hockey think of. So that's amazing.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of Miracle here. Whoever one of my favorite lines in the movie. We just don't match up. You might want to keep that out of your speech. Anyways, I'm taking this off the rails. Good news. One more question for you, Keith, and you're off the hot seat. So I wanted to get one more viewer question for you. If we didn't get to your question last week, guys, we will definitely make sure we get to it next week, but want to make sure we get this one in. So Lord Venom, aka Rick, a good friend of the show, asks, if Sebastien Cossa pans out, how fast do you think he could be NHL ready?
Oh man, that's a hard question.
That's why I saved it for last, Keith.
And the internet cut out.
I was kind of hoping to see him last night, and he didn't play. But boy, is he big!
Yeah.
and I watched them in the warm-ups and so on. You can't tell. I don't know goalies. But the thing is, it's so rare for a 19, 20, 21-year-old. Patrick Waugh did it. It was a 20-year-old, I think, back in '86 when the Canadiens won it. You don't see much of that anymore. It's a really hard league, guys. And if he pans out, will it hasten their rebuild? Absolutely, it will. That's probably. They've turned goaltending into kind of a stable position in Detroit right now.
Yeah,
right? It's not half bad
compared to where we were 2 years ago. Holy cow!
2 months ago.
So,
even that. Yeah, true.
Goaltending is not as critical for this team right now as finding a top line center. They got to get stronger down the middle.
Yeah,
they really need help. That's their critical position. And then they're building. You look at the guys they've drafted, and you got coming in the next couple of years on defense. The big defenseman that they just drafted, Edvinsson, and so on. They've got defensemen coming.
Yep.
Again, I hate to say it. I think they can compete for the playoffs in a couple of years. I don't think they're going to be a bottom 5 team this year. I think they're going to be better than that.
Sure.
Which is both good and bad because of that draft pick again, right?
Right.
You don't want to draft 10th. That means you improved, but 10th overall, you're going to get a player that's going to may or may not be here, right?
Right. Yeah.
But what I see, whether Cossa pans out or not, they're going to be a good team in 4 or 5 years. They're going to be a really good team. Really good team. Yzerman is just beginning to build. He's got the budget. He's finally got the budget squared away. He's not giving out stupid contracts.
Yes.
He doesn't. He acts pretty quickly when he can tell that a player's not going to work out here. Like Anthony Mantha, he makes the trade and he puts a gun to somebody's head. He gets what he gets. Give the captain time. This team is in good hands right now. We're going to see playoff hockey down the road in the not too distant future. Whether that includes this young goaltender or not, I hope it does. But I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, we actually have talked on this show extensively about how we're expected to be in the purgatory in the next season or two. Basically, like we're not going to be getting a lotto pick, but we're going to be good enough to be at the 10 to 15 range, where you're just outside the top 10 pick, but you're not quite making the playoffs yet. So, it's good to hear that you think we're along the same lines as our show does. So that makes us feel better here.
You don't. These things are like battleships now in the NHL. It takes a long time to turn it around, especially when you have to break it all the way down to where Detroit was with all those bad contracts and so on, aging players, guys who didn't work out. Franz Nielsen that contract was just horrible. Abdelkader's contract was horrible. They signed it up. Stephen Weiss, some of those.
I don't remember that name.
Pat talks about him every show almost.
And some of the trades that Ken Holland made at the trade deadline,
Please don't bring up Yarncroc. Please don't bring up Yarncroc.
David Legwand.
Yeah. I mean, that hurt this franchise.
Oh yeah.
It hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Hands down. So, we were going to end on a happy note, and then we started talking about David Legwand.
I am curious to throw one hot seat question at him if we have time, Pat.
Of course we got time. Do it, Kyle.
Who are you most excited for this season for the Red Wings, Keith?
Oh, well, I'm really excited to see Moritz Seider and how he does. I worry, but we expect too much too fast. Yeah. I think he can hold his own, but I think we have to guard our own expectations of this kid. Give him a little bit of a little time to develop. I loved what I saw of him in the prospects tournament a couple of years ago. I like. I don't know if we're going to see Raymond Lucas in Detroit this year. I like to see Veleno. You know who I'm excited about is Michael Rasmussen.
Okay.
I loved what I saw of him the last 20 games or so of the season last year.
Yeah,
It looks like he turned a corner, and he finally figured out that he belongs, what he can do and what he can't do, and he's going to help that team down the middle. They're getting better. They have a whole bunch of number 3 centers.
Yes.
Right. But not enough 1 and 2 centers right now. But how that position shakes out is going to be interesting to me.
Well, that's a much happier way to end the show. Kyle, kick save and a beauty there. Nice
how do you
work.
guys like the kid they signed from Chicago? That
Pius
Suter?
Suter? I'm
very excited.
Yeah, excited about him.
Yeah,
I am too.
The Blackhawk banner got very furious with us once that trade was made, so we knew it was going to be a good one. So
we were out dancing in the
street
street.
a lot. There's another number 2 center maybe.
Yeah, I think that's where we kind of had him slotted until he can prove that he can really take over that first line role if he can.
Suter was impressive on a very mediocre Blackhawks team, which is roundabout probably with the Red Wings. Maybe they won't quite be mediocre yet, but they're getting there. So I think Suter can do some good things, and it's exciting
For sure.
Absolutely.
So good stuff. Well, that is our show. Keith, again, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out to do this. Viewers at home, can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us. Make sure you give us a like, subscribe, comment, share. We want to hear from you, so tweet us at THW Grindline. Keith wants to hear from you, so tweet him at Keith Gave, and we will answer your comments on the next show, as always. Thank you, and we will see you next time.